Nice to meet you.
Welcome.
Hi, Alex.
Thanks. Nice to meet you all too. The last 7 weeks of the production were done remotely. I was curious to know, for you guys as animators and supervising animators, what was the biggest challenge completing the film this way, and if there were any silver linings?
The silver lining of it really was, seeing this entire studio and this entire production kind of rally just like that and get together. I mean, it was crazy. Jude and I, the morning we were all sent home, we were having coffee in our atrium. We were talking. We're like, hey, we hear things might shut down. Huh, crazy, right? Huh. That afternoon, we're like, counties called this, everyone's shutting down. We looked at every shot that was going. Everyone rallied around. And it was just this collaborative approach from all the animators to get their work up, get in front of each other, do some work, do some fixes, check it in. We all grabbed our computers. We all went home. We're all plugging in. We're texting each other to figure out how we're getting online. We're coming online. And the next day, we're continuing to make that movie. And that sense of like a team was just fantastic. And we draw from that still, when we collaborate on the films we're working on in this environment.
And I also think that in what was a very, and still continues to be a very strange and sometimes quite scary time, having the film to focus on was actually quite a good thing for, me, others perhaps, to know that like, okay, well, I'm at home, but I have my computer and I can focus on this.
I think just to add on to what Bobby and Drew said, it was really inspiring just to see how we adapted. I mean, nothing can't replace the human interaction quality that's so ingrained to our day-to-day life. But, there is something nice about just knowing that we have our computers, we meet, we work on these films. I'm very privileged and thankful that, in the midst of all of this, that I can still have a way to connect with my colleagues and put my focus on something that is going to bring some good, put some light into this world. And that's the projects that we're currently working on and, will be released later.
Cool.
Yeah.
Look forward to everything that Pixar puts out. Now, Joe as a character and perhaps maybe others appears in the film in multiple forms. I'm curious to know from an animation standpoint, did the rules of creating Joe as a character change depending on him being in his human form or his soul form or any of the other characters, if that dynamic changed because their form had changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it came down to the design, like when Joe, the soul version was being designed, we always had that version of human Joe next to him so that we could sort of see other proportions similar, is the other features kind of, the same. If you notice, they sort of have the same head shape, and then obviously the hat and the glasses. In the human world, Joe is very, very tall. He was always designed to be a very tall character so that he would sort of almost look out of place. But in the soul world, his proportions of his body are actually slightly different. So his legs are very short. Sometimes we had trouble getting him across the screen because his legs were quite tiny. So we had to kind of like take some liberties there. But across both worlds, I think the main way of just keeping that consistency was always to try and make those authentic acting choices that sort of leaned heavily on Jamie Foxx's performance and, who the character of Joe became. Mm-hmm. And so, however he responded or however we chose to make him move or gesture, it always felt like Joe, regardless of which sort of body he was in,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And just to add a small thing too, I think having the story and knowing what the message what we're going for, I think that helped added an extra layer, a subconscious layer of cohesiveness of like why Joe is behaving the way that he is. Yeah.
The counselors look particularly tricky. because they can morph into pretty much anything, including at one point in the footage we saw a vehicle. I was wondering if you can talk about the complexities of bringing in those characters to life. And I'm also curious to know, like, on your animation side, what those tools even look like, because I imagine it's unlike most characters that you have to manipulate.
The answer is yes. They were complex, right? But hopefully, as an audience member, you'll see something that you forget about that. You know, I think part of the thing that, you know, people don't always notice and don't always think about when they talk about something being complex is it's true that there's a complexity to technically how we're doing it, but there's a complexity, and maybe a bigger one, to the rules we're creating, to give them form, to act in certain ways, to find a performance that's consistent. Because if you have a character that can be anything, you can go down a road where you don't know what it is, right? So a lot of the complexity was in trying to define them, who they were, how they held themselves, how they moved from one thing into another in a different shape. And that took a lot of exploration, a lot of tests. And it's like building a world, a language of style, so to speak. And once we have that, you know, then the animators can really kind of, you know, stand on the shoulders of it and create really specific performances.
I was also really amazed by the look of, you know, they look hand-drawn lines and fingers and facial features on a lot of the characters in the spirit world. You guys tried it as a test with hand-drawn animation, and then they were able to automate that. I was curious, on your end, did you have a lot of control over when you would see those lines appear, or even the ability to like manipulate them as facial features?
Yeah, the face lines themselves, they would ride along the surface of the face and automatically appear and disappear when controls were fired in certain regions, and, you know, get thicker and thinner. But every single one of those lines we were able to control ourselves and sort of override that automated aspect, so we could turn them on if we wanted them on, or off if we didn't want them to appear. We could put them in different positions and change, you know, whether they were straight or bent and how thick or thin or tapered they became. So, you know, we really had it all at our fingers to control that if we needed to, and sometimes we did. For the most part, I think the automation was so good that it just worked out of the box, and it might just be tweaking of a position of a sort of like a dimple line or a furrow line or something. Oftentimes we would end up turning one of 22's furrows off, because when she was angry, she'd have two lines, and her design, one of the rules we came up with was that, you know, she would only have just one furrow line, and we turn the other one off. So we always found that we were giving that note, like, don't forget, turn off the other furrow, you know, so.
That was the last question, but thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see the rest of the film.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Alex.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alex.
Alex, take care.